Small ball, small ball, small ball. That has been the talk of the NBA community for quite some time now. With the ever-changing landscape of the NBA, teams continue to find ways in which they can have shooters at every position on the floor. Now, people seem to believe the Rockets are changing the game of basketball, but we saw a particularly prolific small ball lineup during Kevin Durant's time in Golden State, actually taking it back before Kevin Durant was even signed by Golden State. But during his time, they absolutely crushed opposing teams with Curry, Thompson, Iggy, Draymond, and KD, giving them an incredible combination of defensive and offensive versatility that just couldn't be matched by any other team. Now, the Rockets went a step further, signing anyone that was capable of hitting an open three, or even anyone they thought might be capable of doing so. I mean, who would have thought Austin Rivers, Jeff Green, Ben McLemore, and a guy named Daniel House would be spotting up for the same NBA team? Not to mention PJ Tucker boxing out Giannis and Brook Lopez. Whether small ball to that extent is going to be capable of the ultimate success is yet to be seen, but what we do know is teams will continue to try and find ways to maximize the potential of their best players. That is what Houston have done with Russell Westbrook, Milwaukee and Giannis, Miami and Jimmy Butler, etc. These are teams that have experimented different lineups and tactics to maximize the positives of their best players and minimize their negatives in the process. You can then look at the adverse effect certain lineups are having on star players with teams like the 76ers. The San Antonio Spurs have been good for 2 decades, one of the greatest coaches of all time, and an ability to continually find fantastic talent in the draft and players who fit their play style and basketballing ideology. However, after such a long period of success, it appeared as though they were in serious need of change. Their best player was an aging LaMarcus Aldridge. There were serious question marks over whether Demar DeRozan's style of play could contribute to success, and Popovich didn't seem particularly inclined to play their young talent in Lonnie Walker and Keldon Johnson. Even last year's playoff catalyst Derek White seemed stagnant. Quickly before I get into the video, if you could drop a like on the video right now, that would be greatly appreciated. These videos do take a fair bit of time, and liking it helps out greatly. Also, feel free to sub to the channel if you enjoy the content, because you can expect this type of content anywhere from 3 to 4 times a week. Anyways, let's get back into it. Following the injury to their post-scoring merchant LaMarcus Aldridge, the Spurs had to explore a different lineup, a different look, and a whole different idea surrounding their playstyle. And to say it went well would probably be underselling things. The Blazers and Suns drew the most attention for their outstanding play during the bubble, with the Blazers willing their way to the 8th seed and the Suns going 8-0 yet falling just short. But the San Antonio Spurs, the old, weary Spurs team that were chasing the 23rd consecutive playoff appearance in their franchise history, were going to be a boring watch. No one wanted to see a team led by a 30-year-old Demar DeRozan in the playoffs, and a team that surely had an average age of about 35, with Patty Mills, Rudy Gay, and co rounding out the reserves. But the Spurs were anything but old and boring in Orlando. A record of 5-2 prior to the final game, which saw them rest a number of their starters, was enough to have them in contention right until that final game. And they did it through an injection of youth and talent, and a particularly interesting role for Demar DeRozan, which saw him relinquish some of the ball handling duties during the first 3 quarters and show his scoring ability down the stretch. During the regular season, the Spurs were a middle of the pack team for pace. The likes of DeJounte Murray were able to push the ball up court at pace and create in transition, but they weren't a team that consistently moved the ball at pace and with the desire to catch opposing teams' defenses out by pushing the tempo and getting up shots as quickly as possible, like a number of other teams. And with LaMarcus Aldridge on the floor, this pace was considerably slower and had them close to the bottom of the league, as they had to accommodate for their number 1 option, whose game is predicated on getting good body position on his defender and scoring in the post. Now, entering the bubble with DeRozan in place of Aldridge at the 4, and a 3-guard attack consisting of the incredibly explosive Lonnie Walker and DeJounte Murray alongside Derek White, this Spurs team saw a considerable increase in pace, recording the 3rd fastest pace in the bubble, just behind the Bucks and Rockets. In addition to this 3-guard attack, Jakob Poeltl got a significant increase in minutes, and overall throughout the season, the Spurs were far better with Jakob Poeltl on the floor as opposed to LaMarcus, who had a negative 5.3 differential when he was on the floor. Now, whether this has more to do with lineups or the Spurs having to slow down their offense and pace to accommodate for Aldridge is up in the air. But what isn't up in the air or for debate is the ability Poeltl showed defensively throughout the restart and the potential for that small ball lineup to get up and down the floor at pace with no need to wait for Aldridge to gain post position. There have been murmurs of potential Aldridge trades, but that seems more likely fanfare, particularly with a number of those murmurs discussing the potential of reuniting him with Dame in Portland. With no concrete rumours, we'll assume that Aldridge is a Spurs player next year, and with that being said, we have to try and figure out how they can best reintegrate him into a team that showed so much promise and looked far more fit for the modern day NBA without him. Aldridge and DeRozan are both good players, but to have them sharing significant minutes is something that the Spurs have to look at. We know they both operate in a similar area, and the effect this has on the team's spacing and the guard's ability to get to the rim, with these two clogging the mid-range and painted areas, is far from ideal. LA showed huge signs of being a more than capable shooter, knocking down nearly 40% of his threes on 3 attempts per game, which is ridiculously good numbers for someone that had never really shot the ball from beyond the arc prior to this season. Now, if he were to push these numbers north of 5 or 6 a game, similar to what Brook Lopez has done in Milwaukee over the past few years, that seems the logical step going forward for he and the Spurs. Not only does him shooting do wonders for this team's spacing, but he's not getting any younger, and at 35, crashing and bashing down low is sure to catch up to him in a big way very soon. So if he can prioritize a more outside game, that should not only be beneficial for him over the medium to long term, it will also be beneficial to the Spurs for as long as he stays around. So it seems like a win-win situation. But LaMarcus Aldridge aside, because it feels like I've spent 7 minutes talking about him, what else can we expect from the younger Spurs players? Because it's good to see Rudy Gay playing fantastic off the bench and DeRozan flourishing in a new role. But the reality is, for the Spurs to show significant growth, it's going to have to come from their younger players. With Demar and LA, the Spurs' 2 all-star-ish level players, they needed to see someone else take a big jump this season and cement themselves as that third guy. Someone else that they can rely on, not just for the short term, but for the long term. We thought it might have been DeJounte Murray, and it might still be, but Derek White had the bubble of his life, showing his defensive ability matched with scoring, dropping 20 points on 4 out of 7 games. Despite being 26 years old, this was effectively White's second year in the NBA, so it's not surprising that he had his lulls throughout the season, but this time off seemed to be fantastic for White. And with what he showed on the offensive end of the floor, plus what he has shown defensively early in his career, he gives the Spurs a real plus at the guard position. Someone that can shoot from beyond the arc, someone that can play make, and a very good defender is going to be able to fit into whatever they are trying to do with their system. That's just a versatile player for whatever team, for whatever system. And this is what excites me about the Spurs and has me of the belief they can return to the postseason as early as next year. It's the versatility in their players, and young players at that. DeJounte Murray has already been an all-defensive player, and he's now expanded his game to the point where he can at the very least knock down open three-pointers. His offense is still coming along, but his second year back following a very serious injury should see him make major improvement in my opinion. And you now add to the fold 2 guys that didn't get much playing time during the regular season in Lonnie Walker and Keldon Johnson, who finally got a chance to show what they are capable of and prove they can match it with the best, particularly Keldon Johnson, who impressed in every way possible. Another athletic player who plays good defense and has an improving offensive game, showing signs of being a really good scorer going forward. You then add Walker, who finally got a chance to show what he can do, and he didn't have the big 25-point games Johnson had, but he showed he could give you 10 to 15 a game, plus play good defense on the other side of the ball, and potentially grow into more of an offensive threat going forward. This young core of Murray, White, Walker, and Johnson are all good defenders with expanding offensive games. White is definitely the most polished offensively, but the others have shown they can be capable scorers and are only going to get better with time. Keep in mind, all of these games were against teams fighting for a playoff spot. They didn't even have a chance to show what they could do against the likes of the Knicks or the lowly NBA teams. With how the free agency market is going to look following the financial difficulty teams have faced recently, it's unsure what will be the going rate for a player like DeRozan. I'd say his $27 million player option is over his worth, but whether he opts to try and get the solidity of a 3 to 4 year deal or play this next year out with the Spurs, none of us know. But his new role is less of a primary ball handler and shot taker and more of a guy that delegates those duties to the younger players during the first 3 quarters and can take over during the last quarter, makes him a very valuable piece to that Spurs team, and they will need to retain him to make the playoff push that I think they can, and I think they believe they can. From a draft standpoint, if they can manage to pick up a big man like a Kongwu or Wiseman, I think that would fit what they are trying to do. Both capable rim protectors who have shown they are athletic enough to run the floor at pace, and Okongwu is particularly good at guarding smaller players. Either of these players should fit into the system and the new pace that the Spurs will try to move the ball at. I also wouldn't be opposed or surprised if the Spurs went for one of the many talented guards to back up or challenge DeJounte Murray. It's hard to look too much into this year's draft and free agency without knowing what pick the team will have and whether they will still have DeRozan. But if they were somehow able to pick up someone of Okongwu's ability or a very talented guard, I could see it improving the squad a fair bit in the near future and long-term future. There are quite a few question marks over the Spurs heading into 2021. We don't know if Pop will still be the coach, if DeRozan will accept his player option, and what will happen with Aldridge, but I saw enough from this young core and the new style of play to suggest the Spurs aren't going to bottom out completely like some may believe. This is a team that was still around to the playoff picture before the hiatus and showed significant improvement during Orlando, suggesting they can be a competitive team, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Spurs battling it out for the 8th seed if they make the right moves and continue on the path that they were following during the play-in games. As always, if you did enjoy the video, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. These videos do take a fair bit of time to make, and the only way I know it's worth doing is if you guys enjoy. Other than that, have a good day and I'll catch you next time.